Prime Minister Modi now has met with the Nigerian President Tinubu, and the meeting with them has started in a bid for a better Nigeria-India ties. The Prime Minister arrived in Nigeria on the first leg of his three-nation visit at the invitation of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. This visit is the first by an Indian Prime Minister to Nigeria in 17 years. Prime Minister Modi also received a ceremonial welcome and a guard of honor at the President's house in Abuja in Nigeria. Both nations have over the years nurtured their relationship through periodic interactions, including important bilateral visits at the level of heads of state or government. The visit will therefore accord both countries the opportunity to further strengthen their bilateral trade and commercial relations. Well, we will talk about this with our guests and some of the people who understand what does this mean. Dr. Sharat Kohli, senior economist, with us on the program. Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, president of CDEPR, also with us on the program. Major General Rajan Kochar, defense expert, is also joining us on the show. Last but not the least, Professor DK Giri, author and columnist, with us on the program as well. Dr. Sharat Kohli, I'll begin with you. Well, the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Nigeria in 17 years. This is obviously an important step, but more than this, do you think that there was a tone and tenor that was established when India hosted the G20 and accorded the respect and recognition that the African nations deserved since a very, very long time, and India thus in the process also reinstated and reiterated that it is the default and de facto leader of the global South?
Well, thank you, Vineet, and good evening to my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. I think the Prime Minister is trying to walk the talk because the G20 summit, the way India was very, very vocal about the global South, I think you need to make sure that you actually visit the nations, you establish relationships with them, you show your concern, and we show that we are all one and we are together in the cause. So I think this is a follow-up visit, I would say, from G20, carrying forward from what happened earlier. Now, as far as Nigeria is concerned, essentially energy is what India is importing from them. A bilateral trade of about, I'll give you the economic perspective, about $12 billion. India has a deficit with Nigeria. In fact, no surprises, with every country from where India is importing energy, there is a trade deficit. So there's more of imports, less of exports for that matter, to make it easy to understand. Well, if you look at the profile of Nigeria as a country, the population size, so far as I know, is less than that of Uttar Pradesh. Poverty is rampant, one of the biggest poverty ratios, about 38 to 40% poverty, people below the poverty line, I would say. Inflation is high, unemployment is high. There is very wide gap between the equality of income. When we talk of inequality, the people who are into energy and industry, related industry, are very, very wealthy. Whereas most of the Nigerian population is poor. The average age of a person, what surprises me is that the average life expectancy in Nigeria is less than 55 years. So that shows there's a huge gap in the healthcare. So I think with the number of MOUs which India has done on healthcare, on industry, on agriculture in the last 7-8 years, they have been auguring well for Nigeria. So in return of the energy that we are importing from them, India has played its part in extending a helping hand to Nigeria. Nigeria is not one of the best parts of the world, shall I say. It is totally dependent on energy exports. Has got nothing much inside. There is agriculture, there's a little bit of industry, and most of the industry is connected to the energy sector. So there's nothing much that Nigeria is producing as far as some agriculture which is there. So services sector takes away about, I would say, 54 to 55% of the economy, which is quite similar to the Indian service sector percentage. So I think the Prime Minister's visit will help in changing the economic profile between the two nations. Nigeria can take the prowess which India has on the IT sector, in the healthcare sector, in pharmaceutical sector. And as far as India is concerned, I think it can only better the energy exports, because Nigeria is heavily dependent on energy. So tomorrow, if something happens to the energy sector, I think Nigeria would be left nowhere. So I think Nigeria is also trying to fortify its future to see if there is a situation around the world, because the Nigerian currency also gets exposed to very heavy volatility because of the oil sector, energy sector. So I think Nigeria as a country is trying to sort of immune itself in the times to come to see if there's something happening to the energy sector, how best it can probably use this friendship or MOUs with India, the understanding with India, to see that they can survive and they can survive comfortably. And at the same time, they can also grow. So the Nigerian economy, as far as the GDP is concerned, on PPP terms, maybe it is $1.4 trillion. That is all because of energy. If you take out energy from Nigeria, I think Nigeria, you see gaping holes in the economy here and there. So I think the visit of the Prime Minister, Vinny, is going to boost the bilateral ties undoubtedly. It is also going to strengthen India's resolve to the global south, and it is going to make Nigeria look to a brighter future, is what I would like to say for this time, Vinny.
Dr. Bhattacharya, how do you look at this relationship? Obviously, India also understands when it comes to opportunities between the nations and opportunities between the people of the nations. Both these countries are well embedded towards that common goal.
As Dr. Sharad Kohli mentioned, Nigeria is a large economy. It's bigger than Pakistan is, and it's got a population slightly less than that of Pakistan and an economy which is bigger than that of Pakistan. So just to give a perspective of what's the size we're talking about. And as Dr. Kohli mentioned, unlike Pakistan, Nigeria has something very, very critical, which is oil. We do need that energy. Now, unfortunately, not all of our refineries are aligned to the kind of oil that Nigeria produces, but that's just a matter of technicality, and those issues can be resolved over a period of time. If you can get cheaper energy, cheaper resources, that's critical from an Indian perspective. Reciprocally, it's important for Nigeria to get plugged in one of the largest economies in the world, which is India. So we are a fast-growing economy. I think by now we have become fourth largest in the midst of FY25. We have beaten Japan in terms of size of economy, and Nigeria does need that. So it's a very symbiotic relationship that we are talking about. In addition, if you look at the Loboto Trans-African Railway that's being funded by US, it's connecting to the West Coast, which is quite close to where Nigeria is. And that's going to enable the transport of critical minerals, of minerals that are important for the green energy sector, and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's important to have a good working economic and geopolitical relationship in Nigeria. Also, the fact that there is a churn happening in Africa. If you look at the larger part of Africa, it's very definitively moving away from the colonial clutches. If you look at most post-colonial nations, they were still under the colonial clutches, even though the military powers had gone. Now, in Africa, we see that they are throwing out that neo-colonial yoke and are asserting themselves. In that context, it's becomes very important for India to develop not just Nigeria, but also have a good relationship with the rest of Africa. I think moving forward also, we need to be careful that we don't fall into the kind of relationship trap that we have fallen into with, say, Nepal or other neighboring countries that we have, in spite of the best efforts of the government. So it's important that the industries, the businesses are aligned to what the government is trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, it is necessary and important for the Indian economy that we align with Nigeria, and the other way around, that given that Nigeria is going through a tough time from an economic perspective, India definitely will provide that support, as India has done to other countries such as Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and so on repeatedly, Maldives. Nigeria will definitely find support from India, and India has that capability to extend the support with no strings attached, unlike many of the other economic powers who provide all kinds of, they provide the aid with all kinds of strings attached. Also, I would like to remark that, traditionally Africa is called the dark continent. But from an Indian perspective, it's actually Latin America and South America, which really is the dark continent. So I would like to add my 2 bits over here, that after Africa, I think it's important that we also start opening up similar relationships which are deep in nature in the South American continent.
All right. Okay. General Kocher, your take on this camaraderie, if we can call it, for the lack of a better word, between these two countries. And let us also remember that India does want to become a nation. It does want to have a market for the defense products that we have been producing in the last few years. We've been exporting to a number of countries. Rather than being an importer now, we are an exporter now. Do you think that the Prime Minister's vision also entails this kind of an economic angle?
Vineet, thank you for inviting me to the program. Very relevant area of cooperation between Nigeria and India in the defense sector. The two previous speakers have spoken on the economic aspects. I would like to focus more on the defense aspects because I'm aware National Defense Academy, Defense Services Staff College, both places where I've done the courses. I've had fellow students from Nigeria, and this training mechanism which we have established with Nigeria dates back to 1960s, and we have been, as a matter of fact, all their leaders and the presidents today have been trained in India as military leaders. So we have a great deal of trust, because whenever you carry out any defense deals or anything, trust is the most important thing. So they understand India very well. Now, what are the areas we are looking at? Because first we have to understand what are the strategic requirements of a country like Nigeria. The biggest problem Nigeria faces is the insurgency in the northeast of its region. It is a similar kind of insurgencies which were there in India, in our northeast also some time back. So this experience which we carry of helping them with intelligence sharing, helping them with surveillance equipment, helping them with technology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, as well as the Nigerian government needs ammunition, it needs anti-tank weapons, and these kind of rockets and missiles. So these kind of equipment we have already shortlisted for Nigeria. As a matter of fact, I would like to inform your viewers that a number of MOUs are already existing between India and Nigeria in the defense sector. The first one is on defense training and capacity building. The second one is on the defense industry cooperation. Nigeria wants to establish a defense industrial complex, and India has an MOU, and I think this Prime Minister's visit is going to be a catalyst which is going to propel our vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat and spreading our investment into other countries. The next MOU is on counter-terrorism, and as I actually mentioned with you that Boko Haram is one group or insurgent group in Nigeria where the problem is being faced by Nigeria in terms of terrorism, and we have an MOU with them to actually help them understand how to combat this and give them the kind of equipment and wherewithal to actually fight them. And lastly is the maritime security and anti-piracy. You would be aware that Nigeria, the way it is located, it is prone to piracy. It is prone to these.
So just hold on to that thought. In fact, the Prime Minister is speaking. We're going to cut across.
140 करोड़ भारतवासियों की तरफ से और मेरी तरफ से संवेदनाएं प्रकट करता हूं। आपके राहत कार्यों के समर्थन में भारत 20 टन मानवीय सहायता भेज रहा है। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत और नाइजीरिया के बीच भारत और नाइजीरिया के बीच स्ट्रेटेजिक संबंधों को मजबूत करने में आपकी निजी प्रतिबद्धता, इसके लिए मैं आपका अभिनंदन करता हूं। मुझे खुशी है कि पिछले वर्ष भारत की अध्यक्षता में नाइजीरिया की पहली बार G20 समिट में गेस्ट कंट्री के रूप में जुड़ा और ये सौभाग्य हमको मिला और हमने मिलकर अफ्रीकन यूनियन को G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता दी। ये मेरे हिसाब से बड़ा ऐतिहासिक काम हुआ है। यह भी खुशी है कि नाइजीरिया को ब्रिक्स में पार्टनर कंट्री का दर्जा दिया गया है। मैं भारत की तरफ से इस महत्वपूर्ण उपलब्धि के लिए भी नाइजीरिया को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। यह आपके नेतृत्व में नाइजीरिया की विश्व पटल पर अहम भूमिका का परिचायक है। एक्सेलेंसी, नाइजीरिया के साथ अपनी स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप को हम उच्च प्राथमिकता देते हैं। रक्षा, ऊर्जा, आर्थिक विषय, टेक्नोलॉजी, हेल्थ, एजुकेशन, कल्चर जैसे कई क्षेत्र ऐसे हैं में हमारा सहयोग मजबूत है और अनेक नई संभावनाएं भी हमारे इस संबंधों में जुड़ी हुई है। जैसा अभी हमने चर्चा की, आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद, पायरेसी या ड्रग तस्करी जैसी चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए हम मिलकर काम करते रहे हैं और मजबूती से हम आगे भी करते रहेंगे। नाइजीरिया में रहने वाले 60,000 से ज्यादा भारतीय समुदाय के लोग हमारे संबंधों में अहम कड़ी हैं। उनकी देखभाल के लिए एक गार्डियन के रूप में आप जो उनको संभालते हैं, इसके लिए मैं आपका बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। मुझे विश्वास है कि आज की हमारी वार्ता से हमारे संबंधों में नया अध्याय जुड़ेगा और हम मिलकर वैश्विक स्तर पर ग्लोबल साउथ की प्राथमिकताओं को उजागर करते रहेंगे और हमारे संयुक्त प्रयासों से सफलता भी मिलेगी। एक्सेलेंसी, मुझे नाइजीरिया के राष्ट्रीय सम्मान देने के लिए आपके निर्णय के लिए मैं हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह सम्मान केवल मेरा नहीं, लेकिन यह सम्मान 140 करोड़ भारतवासियों का सम्मान है और यह भारत नाइजीरिया के सदियों पुराने जो संबंध है, उन संबंधों का सम्मान है और इस सम्मान के लिए मैं नाइजीरिया का, आपके सरकार का और देशवासियों का हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
तो प्रधानमंत्री का ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स थे जब शिष्टमंडल।
All right, the Prime Minister, in fact, thanking the Nigerian government, expressing the importance of both the nations working in tandem to achieve common goals, and how India has always been a benefactor to the cause of Nigerian freedom, Nigerian trade, Nigerian commerce, and the socio-economic fabric as well. Professor DK Giri, author and columnist, also with us on the program. Professor Giri, I hope you're there with us, sir. Professor Giri?
Yeah,
All
I am
right,
here.
So the Prime Minister is in Nigeria, sir. And okay, sir, I can hear you now. Let me finish my question, please.
Yes.
The Prime Minister is in Nigeria now, and he's obviously enunciated the importance that both these nations have built over the years. And the fact of the matter is that there is a strong influence by China as well when it comes to wooing African nations. Do you think when it comes to a common partner outlook, the African nations are perhaps more leaning towards India than they would be against China, because obviously there is a social connect with Africa as well?
Yeah, that's the challenge. I wanted to share two strategic concerns in India's dealing with Africa, and in this today's context, Nigeria. But I would commend the Prime Minister for his initiative in going to Africa after 17 years. Like he said in his speech, it would be a turning point in the bilateral relationship, and he has taken an excellent step. But the two concerns that I wanted to share is that when I heard the panelists, but there are other observers, we have a feeling that we are going there to support Nigeria or Africa for that matter. But it is in mutual interest. The history of India and Africa are similar, and the challenges are also similar. If Nigeria is facing economic crisis, we have a huge economic problems, huge segment of poor people, and in the Human Development Index, if you see, we are some 183 or something. So we are our GDP has grown, but that has not reflected in our economic development. So we need other countries as well. So that attitude that we are going there to help out, we do help other countries. We have a humanitarian approach in our foreign policy. But that thinking, we are the grand patron of foreign relations with Africa, that should be removed really. The second concern which you just raised about China. China is an elephant in the room whenever we discuss foreign policy. And China has invested billions in Africa. So this is where we have to make a very conscious distinction between our relationship and China's. Prime Minister Modi said once that China is interested in extracting resources from Africa, but our approach is for human development. And that is correct. So our approach to Africa or any other country, developing country, should be clearly made distinct from the Chinese approach. Then only people will have a choice. Because this is what has happened in our neighborhood, where China is desperately trying to penetrate by luring them with money, Sri Lanka or Nepal for that matter. So, and they have more money than us. Their GDP is 5 times higher than ours. So how do we compete with China? We compete with values, our approach, our humanitarian approach, not the kind of predatory, extractive approach in our foreign policy. So that is very important. Prime Minister has taken the initiative, but observers, foreign policy department should stress that, taking the cue from the Prime Minister, that India is different from China. We are inevitably compared with China in our foreign policy, whether we like it or not. So we'll have to compete with China, and we have to make ourselves look different from China. These are the two concerns I wanted to share. We have, with Nigeria, they have oil, and their economy is stronger. Their per capita growth is, or income is higher than India. India's per capita GDP is lowest in G20 countries. Let's not forget that. So we need a mutual interest, and we have a huge tradition, long tradition of Indian technology and Indian engineers and business working in Nigeria. And there is so much common with Nigeria. That is the most populous country in Africa. We are the most populous country in the world, and we have so much in common. Terrorism, development, poverty. Nigeria was to be quite rich in West Africa. In fact, it was the richest in West Africa, but now their economy has tanked for various regions, and they would need India, a country like India, to bail them out and help overcome their economic crisis. And we need Nigeria's resources, Nigeria's human relationship, Nigerian students in India, etc., to help our economy grow. So it is purely in mutual interest. India should never take that attitude that we are there, a kind of a patronizing attitude that we have begun to show with Canada. That Canada, we can deal with Canada, America is another thing, but Canada we can take on. And that approach really is not there yet. We have not arrived.
All right, so point taken. We've unfortunately run out of time, but appreciate everyone who joined us on the program.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.